The smell of grilled burgers and fresh apple pie drifted through the oak panel community center of Oak Ridge Estates as I sat quietly at the folding table in the back corner. 48 residents packed the room for our annual Thanksgiving potluck, everyone in their Sunday best, laughing about recent cruises to the Bahamas, the new Teslas in their driveways, and how the HOA had finally fixed the common area landscaping. To them, I was just Lila Harper, the 29-year-old freelance photographer who lived in the plain in-unit townhome on Maple Lane and never seemed to have two nickels to rub together. Lila, honey, are you still doing that little photography thing? Karen Whitaker, our HOA president, asked with her signature saccharine smile while carving into a perfectly roasted turkey. Her pearl necklace caught the overhead lights like tiny accusations. When are you going to get a real job and start contributing to the community like everyone else? Before I could open my mouth, board member Derek Lang, Karen's loyal lapdog, leaned in with a patronizing chuckle. She's been finding herself for 5 years now. Some of us have actual responsibilities, kids in private school, mortgages to pay, and lawns that actually meet the 2-inch height rule. He waved a hand toward his wife Jessica and their 2 perfectly groomed children. The rest of the table nodded like trained seals. Karen Whitaker, 58, ruled Oak Ridge Estates the way a dictator runs a small country. Her husband owned 3 car dealerships across the county, and she spent her days organizing charity galas that somehow always ended with her picture in the local paper. She wore designer outfits that cost more than my fake monthly rent and spoke in that soft, reasonable tone that made every insane rule sound like common sense. Speaking of responsibilities, she said, setting down her fork with theatrical authority. The chatter died instantly. The board has been discussing Lila's situation. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face blank. I had learned years ago that reacting only fed the beast. We've been far too lenient, Karen continued, her voice carrying that same boardroom gravitas she used when slapping $500 fines for unauthorized holiday lights. The extra assessments, the repeated warnings about your so-called artistic garden beds, the parking violations with that ancient Honda Civic. It's time for tough love. Her husband Richard cleared his throat supportively. Lila, we're placing an immediate lien on your unit and suspending your community privileges, pool, clubhouse, even trash pickup, until you bring everything into full compliance and pay the backlog. The room went pin-drop silent except for the clink of silverware. Derek smirked into his mashed potatoes. Aunt Linda, actually just nosy resident Linda, raised her eyebrows with glee. My teenage neighbor Sophie looked genuinely sorry for me. You're 29 years old, Karen pressed on. Derek here was married with a thriving business by your age. Half the neighborhood has second homes or investment properties. What do you have to show for yourself? A few Instagram photos in a yard that looks like a Pinterest experiment gone wrong. I took a slow sip of lukewarm iced tea, letting the words wash over me. The irony was delicious enough to choke on. Here was Karen lecturing me about financial responsibility while sitting in a subdivision every single house of which I had secretly purchased and developed through Horizon Holdings 3 years earlier when her husband's dealerships nearly went under from a bad casino investment. The same woman whose perfect common areas I funded anonymously, so the HOA books always looked balanced. The same neighborhood eating a potluck I had quietly underwritten through shell company catering donations. I understand, I said quietly, setting my glass down. Karen's smile tightened. Good. This isn't punishment, dear. It's about helping you grow up and become a responsible member of our little family. Derek leaned back, satisfied. Maybe now you'll finally get serious. I could probably get you an entry-level gig at my firm, filing paperwork, answering phones, honest work. That's very kind, I replied, standing and smoothing my plain cardigan. I think I should head home now. Thank you for the hospitality. Karen's husband looked concerned. Lila, you don't have to leave. We can discuss this as a community. No, it's fine, I said, grabbing my coat from the rack. I need a process. As I walked toward the double doors, I heard Karen's voice behind me, syrupy and loud enough for everyone. This is for your own good. Lila, you'll thank us someday. I paused at the threshold, hand on the cold metal handle, and allowed myself the tiniest smile. I'm sure I will. The November air bit crisp as I walked to my deliberately modest Honda Civic, the one I chose specifically to keep up appearances. While I drove past the identical beige houses and perfectly edged lawns, I couldn't help grinning wider. If only they knew every single streetlight, every sprinkler head, every HOA-approved mailbox I passed existed because I had bought the entire 187-acre subdivision through Horizon Holdings. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Don't take it personally. Karen's just trying to motivate the neighborhood. I pulled into my driveway, another property I owned outright, and stepped inside the deliberately sparse townhome. I poured a glass of the good Cabernet I kept hidden behind the cheap wine bottles and opened my laptop. The screen glowed with my real net worth, $850,347,291. My photography was my passion, business was my talent. For 3 years, I had been the invisible hand keeping this entire HOA afloat. Karen's precious common area budget, funded by me. The emergency reserve that saved the pool when the liner cracked, my money. Even a landscaping contract that kept every lawn at that exact 2-inch height, my company. I opened the encrypted files and started reviewing accounts. Time to stop being the neighborhood's secret ATM. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. I was reviewing quarterly reports for my tech investments when the first panic call came at 9:47 a.m. Karen's voice was already strained. Lila, there's some kind of mistake with the HOA operating account. The bank says it's been frozen, but we just paid the snow removal contractor yesterday. That's strange, I replied calmly, sipping my coffee. Have you called the bank? They said the primary guarantor closed the line of credit. But Richard and I opened that account. Actually, I had opened it through a shell company. But why ruin the surprise? Maybe identity theft, I suggested sweetly. You should probably check every single HOA account. The second call came 20 minutes later. Derek, voice tight with panic. Lila, something's wrong with the Community Improvement Fund. 3 vendor cards declined this morning. We're supposed to start the holiday lighting installation today. Sounds serious, I said. Have you asked Karen? Maybe she can fix it with her connections. I tried, but she's dealing with her own mess. Apparently, the entire reserve account is locked. By noon, my phone had exploded with 17 different calls and texts. The neighborhood group chat was on fire. Karen, bank says our accounts are compromised. Derek here, same. 3 business cards dead. Pool chemicals bounced. My kids are going to lose their minds. Linda, is anyone else having issues? My assessment check was returned. Uncle Mike, what the hell is going on? Credit line suspended. I'll let them spiral for a few hours before typing one innocent message. Having some weird technical issues with my photography client payments too. Banks updating systems maybe? Should clear up soon. The truth was far simpler and far crueler. I hadn't closed their accounts. I had simply revoked the secret guarantees I had quietly provided for 3 years. The HOA operating fund looked frozen because the hidden credit lines I control were gone. The reserve account was empty because the trust one established to back it had been withdrawn. None of them had lost a dime of their own money. They had simply lost access to money that had always been mine. Tuesday brought full escalation. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting at the community center. While I walked in, the usual polished room felt different. Heat turned down, fresh flowers gone, fluorescent lights flickering like they knew the end was near. Karen looked haggard, perfect makeup slightly smudged. Derek paced like a caged animal. Residents sat clutching coffee cups, eyes wide. Thank God you're here. Lila, Karen said, voice cracking for the first time in memory. We're dealing with a neighborhood crisis. What kind? I asked, settling into the same back row chair I always took. Some kind of coordinated financial attack, Derek explained, running hands through his hair. It's like someone with serious resources has targeted the entire HOA. I raised an eyebrow. That sounds paranoid. Derek, is it? Karen nodded grimly. Every account frozen. Every vendor payment bounced. Every contract falling apart in the same 48 hours. That's not coincidence. I leaned forward. Had you contacted the authorities? We tried, Karen whispered. They said without evidence of theft, it's a civil matter. The banks keep saying the accounts were closed by authorized parties. But none of us authorized anything. The room turned to Mimi, the struggling photographer they had just publicly shamed 2 days earlier. Linda actually said it out loud. Lila, I hate to ask this, especially after, well, but do you have any contacts in the financial world? Anyone who might help us understand what's happening? All eyes locked on me. The same people who had smirked at my little photography thing were now begging the neighborhood failure for help with a multi-million-dollar crisis. I stood slowly. I might know someone. Let me make a call. I stepped outside onto the patio, pulled out my phone, and spent 10 minutes checking my stock portfolio and answering emails from my property managers. When I returned, their hopeful faces almost made me feel guilty. Almost. Good news, I announced. I spoke with a financial consultant I know. She says this kind of situation usually involves someone with significant insider knowledge and resources. Karen's face darkened. Insider knowledge? You mean someone who knows exactly how our accounts are structured? Someone who's been watching spending patterns, reserve requirements, vendor contracts, I continued. Someone who understands precisely how interconnected everything is. Derek stopped pacing. Lila, that's terrifying. Who would have that kind of access? I let the question hang in the thick silence. Then I walked to the center of the room and pulled out my phone. Someone like me. The confused quiet stretched for several long seconds. Karen blinked. Lila, what on earth are you talking about? I opened my banking app and turned the screen so the entire room could see. The numbers were large enough to read from the back row. $850,346,982. Karen squinted, then laughed nervously. Lila, that can't be real. That's some kind of app glitch. No glitch. Karen. I opened another app showing my real estate holdings, then another displaying my business portfolio. For the past 3 years, I've been the one quietly funding this entire neighborhood. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the faint hum of the dying fluorescent lights. Derek's forced laugh died in his throat. Lila, that's impossible. You take pictures for a living. You drive a 15-year-old Honda. You live in the cheapest unit on Maple Lane. I smiled gently. I live in the cheapest unit because I own the entire subdivision. Derek, I take pictures because I love it, not because I need the money. I scrolled through my phone and held up a property deed. This community center you're standing in, purchased through Horizon Holdings when your dealerships were hemorrhaging cash in 2020. You've all been living here as my tenants for 3 years. Karen sat down hard, coffee sloshing over the rim of her cup. Lila, honey, I don't understand. I took the seat that used to be hers at the head of the table, the power position. Let me explain it simply. 3 years ago, when the board's secret casino investment went south and the HOA reserve was about to collapse, I stepped in. Instead of letting the neighborhood foreclose and fall apart, I bought every mortgage, every common area lien, every vendor contract. I kept the books balanced anonymously so you could keep playing HOA Queen. I passed my phone around. Property deeds, corporate filings, bank statements, all bearing my name or Horizon Holdings. Karen, That brand new Mercedes you drive to every meeting? I bought it and had it delivered with a card that said it was from the Community Appreciation Fund. The renovations to the clubhouse you took credit for? My construction crew. The landscaping company that keeps every lawn at exactly 2 inches? Mine. Even the ridiculous beige-only mailbox rule you love so much, enforced by employees on my payroll. Linda's mouth hung open. The filings show you own everything. Not everything, I corrected. About 83% of Oak Ridge Estates, including the land beneath your feet. Karen finally found her voice, though it came out as a whisper. Why? Why would you do this? Because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer, I said, standing and walking to the window. Outside, the perfectly manicured lawns were already starting to brown because the irrigation contract I controlled had been paused. I wanted to know whether your community standards were about neighbors or about power. Derek stared at the documents like they might bite him. The emergency loan that saved the pool last year, that was you? I've been your invisible guardian angel for 3 years, I said. But why hide it? Karen asked, tears actually forming, real ones, not the crocodile variety she used at board meetings. I turned back to face them all, because I wanted to see the real Karen Whitaker, the one who preaches family and standards while slapping fines on single moms for having the wrong shade of mulch, the one who lectures about responsibility while secretly gambling HOA money on casino deals. The room stayed deathly quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. Outside, a lawn service truck, my lawn service truck, idled at the curb, driver waiting for instructions that would never come. Karen's face had gone from pale to an interesting shade of purple. What happens now? She asked, voice small for the first time in her life. I sat back down in the president's chair. You have 2 choices. Option 1. I restore every account exactly as it was. You go back to running your little fiefdom. I keep secretly funding your lifestyle, and nothing changes. You keep finding people for Christmas lights, and I keep smiling politely. Derek swallowed. And option 2, we start over honestly, I said. I stop hiding. You stop treating me like the neighborhood charity case. I'll help build a real community, not one based on beige paint and 2-inch grass, but one based on actual fairness. It will require work, humility, and treating every resident as an equal instead of subjects. Linda leaned forward. Lila, I don't understand. How'd you build all this? Where did the initial money come from? I smiled. Remember that college internship at Goldman Sachs everyone laughed about? The one you all call just filing papers? I wasn't filing papers. I was learning. When I graduated, I used every penny and a small loan to flip my first foreclosed townhome in Brooklyn. Did it 12 times in 2 years. Reinvested everything. By 2018, I had enough to start buying entire subdivisions, including this one. Karen stood up slowly, hands shaking. We failed your test, didn't we? It wasn't a test, I said. It was research. And what I learned is that you're capable of growth. The question is whether you actually want it. The next morning at 9 a.m. Sharp. The entire board showed up at my real office, the top 3 floors of the Horizon Tower in downtown. They had never known the sleek glass building with my company name on it existed. Karen's eyes widened when the elevator doors opened onto the marble lobby. Derek actually whistled. I led them into the conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Welcome to the real Oak Ridge Estates, I said, gesturing to the scale model of the neighborhood on the table. Every house, every street, every rule you wrote is here because I allowed it. Karen sat down heavily. Lila, I owe you an apology. We all do. We judged you based on appearances and assumptions instead of seeing who you actually were. I nodded. You measured worth in fines and compliance reports instead of character. You love the idea of control more than you love the people you were supposed to serve. Derek cleared his throat. If you're willing to help us start over, honestly, I'd like to learn. Not just take your money, but understand how you think. The others murmured agreement. Even Karen, voice cracking, said, "I'm proud of what you've accomplished and ashamed of how we treated you. Can you forgive us?" I looked around the table at these flawed, proud, suddenly humble people who had just learned a brutal lesson about assumptions and power. "There's nothing to forgive," I said, "but there's a lot to rebuild. Where do we start?" I opened my calendar. "Tomorrow morning, right here, you're going to see the books, the real books, and then we're going to redesign every rule from scratch. No more 2-inch grass tyranny. No more beige-only mailboxes. Actual community input instead of Karen's personal preferences." Karen actually laughed, a real, self-deprecating laugh. "I deserve that." As they filed out, Derek paused at the door. "Thank you, Lila, for saving us, for teaching us, and for giving us another chance." I smiled. "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see what we're actually going to build together." That night, I sat in my still modest townhome, the one I had deliberately kept plain as my secret base of operations, and planned the future. New real estate projects that could use Derek's actual skills instead of my hidden contracts. Investment strategies that would teach Karen genuine financial responsibility instead of casino gambling. Community rules written by residents, not dictated by one woman's ego. For 3 years, I had been their invisible financial guardian. Starting tomorrow, I would be their visible partner, mentor, and equal. The neighborhood that had publicly cut me off on Sunday would begin its real education on Wednesday. And for the first time in years, I was genuinely excited to see what we could create when everyone finally stopped pretending. The group chat, once filled with panic, now buzzed with cautious optimism. "Karen, I turned the heat back up in the community center. It felt wrong to keep it cold." Derek, still staring at those documents. "Can't believe what you built. Nervous about tomorrow, but excited to learn." Linda, Lila, "I'm sorry it took a crisis for us to really see you." Sophie, "You're kind of my hero now." I closed the app and looked out at the neighborhood lights. Lights that would stay on because I chose to keep them on. The lawns would stay green, the pool would reopen, and the ridiculous rules would finally die. Not because I forced it, but because they finally understood that real community isn't built on fear and fines. It's built on truth. And truth, as it turns out, is the most satisfying revenge of all. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in humility and growth. We rewrote the HOA covenants together. Actual town hall style meetings where every resident had a vote instead of Karen's previous "I decide" method. The 2-inch grass rule became "mow it so your neighbors don't hate you." The beige-only mailbox policy died in a glorious bonfire of old rule books in the community courtyard. Residents painted their boxes every color of the rainbow. And for the first time, the neighborhood actually looked alive. Karen showed up to every meeting with a notebook instead of a gavel. She listened. She took notes. She even apologized publicly at the next potluck. Yes, another one. But this time the turkey was on me and nobody got lectured. "I spent years confusing control with leadership," she admitted to the crowd. Voice steady but eyes honest. Lila showed me the difference. I'm grateful. The applause was genuine. Derek started shadowing me at Horizon Holdings twice a week, learning actual deal-making instead of riding my coattails. His wife, Jessica, told me privately, he comes home excited for the first time in years. Thank you. Even the landscaping crew, still my employees, now took direction from a new resident committee instead of Karen's decrees. The lawn stayed beautiful, but nobody got fined for planting a single rogue daffodil. Sophie, my teenage neighbor, started tagging along on photography shoots. You went from the weird, quiet lady to the boss of everything, she laughed one afternoon while we framed golden hour shots of the now colorful mailboxes. Kinda badass. I just smiled. Turns out being quiet doesn't mean being powerless. The financials stabilized under transparent management. No more secret subsidies, just honest partnerships. The HOA reserve grew because residents actually paid their assessments on time when they felt respected instead of terrorized. My net worth ticked upward as the neighborhood property values soared once the absurd rules stopped scaring off buyers. One crisp December evening, I stood on the community center steps watching the first official non-beige holiday lights glow in every color imaginable. Karen walked up beside me, hands in her coat pockets. "It's beautiful," she said quietly, "and terrifying." I almost destroyed everything because I was afraid of looking weak. I nodded. "Power looks different when you stop needing to prove it." She turned to me. "I was wrong about you from day one." "I'm sorry." "Apology accepted," I said. "Just keep proving it every day." She smiled, a real one. No saccharine aftertaste. "Deal." As I walked back to my townhome, still deliberately modest on the outside, Empire headquarters on the inside, I passed lawns that were now alive with personality instead of uniformity. Neighbors waved instead of whispering. Kids played outside past 7 p.m. without fear citations. The entire neighborhood breathed easier because one quiet photographer finally stopped hiding and made them see what real community actually costs. Not money. Truth. And sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, patient, and ends with everyone, especially the Karen, thanking you for it.